These first set of slides are going to introduce server-side scripting, and there's lots of different languages that are used to do server-side scripting, such as Perl, Python, PHP, and Microsoft's suite of technologies which are called active server pages. We're going to focus on PHP in teaching period 1, although the truth is all of these languages are used in all sorts of places. Well, what exactly are scripting languages? Well, in this context, you have to realise that there's lots and lots of different ways of actually embedding programming language inside a web page. I mean, you can just have plain HTML files, and you may have seen those in the first year. You can have client-side or server-side programming code. I won't go into that in too much detail here. Or you can have sort of mixtures of the above, which is where you create really sophisticated things, like some of the applications that you would have seen running in a browser, like Gmail or Outlook, if they're running inside a browser window. So let's just have a look at a couple of these. The no scripting example, well, let's imagine that you're using a browser on some machine somewhere and you're going to connect to a server machine. Well, what happens is, using your browser software, a connection will be made over the internet to a web server. So let's imagine you're going to go to the Google homepage. Let's pretend there's no code in there. You type in google.com. What happens is a request is issued for that page and it's sent to the web server using HTTP. Now, the web server at the back end is just a simple bit of code, and what it does is it just searches for the file that you've requested. Now, it uses Hypertext Transfer Protocol, that's what HTTP stands for. It finds the page, and remember, this is a page that simply contains plain HTML. There's no programming code, there's nothing smart about it, it's not a dynamic page. It finds that page, and all it does is it sends that page back to the browser window, and in the browser displays the page. Now, with server-side scripting, things are a little bit more complicated. So let's imagine that you request a page, and what the page you're actually going to request has got PHP code inside it. So again, starts off in the same way. You type in the name of a page, google.com, or let's imagine it's amazon.co.uk. The page request goes off to the web server. So that's the piece of software that's running in the back room somewhere on the planet. The server finds that page, and this is where the extra magic happens, because what happens at this point is the server-side code is actually executed. So all that PHP code, whatever the programming language code that is that's actually doing all the server-side work, that code actually runs and something happens at that point. And then the page is sent back and the page is then displayed. So with server-side scripting, and that's the one that we're going to be focusing on this teaching period, the code sits inside the HTML and it runs inside the server before the page is sent back to the browser. So you can't actually see the server-side code. And we'll see a demonstration of that later on. Now, the advantage of having server-side code is it can access lots and lots of resources in the server. So, for example, you could have a database server. You could have customer records, product details, stock inventory, all sorts of information which is changing over time, and that information is connected to the web server. So, for example, let's imagine you were doing something like saying, how many items are there in stock? So you want to know, can I order this particular thing from Amazon? The request gets sent off to the web server. And what the web server does is it actually executes that code and it looks for the information that's required. And that information is going to vary over time. How many of these items are actually in stock? So at that point, it could run SQL, for example. It could be something like select star from stock. How many items are there? Something like that. And what happens is that number gets returned back to the web server, and then the HTML is generated around that by the PHP, and then the result is returned back to the browser window and the answer is displayed. So, why PHP? Well, There's been lots of different versions of PHP, and there's been quite amazing growth for PHP over the last nearly 20 years, 30 years. Lots of different versions. Latest version is PHP 7, and it's still very, very popular. And so you can see, if you look at the W3 Text site, you can see that PHP is used in a vast number of sites. And other technologies that are out there, like Java and Ruby and Scala, they're also in use. They're used in fewer sites, maybe, like Java and ASP.NET. They might be used in higher traffic sites, but PHP is still regarded as an all-round a reasonable language to use for web servers and web server programming. And when you look at the statistics, it's borne out by the actual number of websites actually using PHP. Now, there's a caveat here. It can be difficult to determine what sites are using what languages, and as it says, some sites might be using more than one language. But PHP is still immensely popular out there, and you can see by an order of magnitude compared to the others. The thing about other languages are like Perl and Python and Java to an extent. You can create different kinds of programs out there, so they're used in other ways as well. PHP tends to be used as a scripting language for web pages. Now, there are loads of different books out there. One of the ones that I might refer to here is the Programming PHP book from O'Reilly, which is on the 4th edition currently. There's lots of different PHP books out there, though. You don't have to use that one. There's ones in the library. There are ones available as ebooks. Any PHP book will be fine, but what I would recommend is that you look for PHP 5 onwards. If you pick up a book and it's got PHP 4, there were quite significant changes between some of the language features between 4 and 5. So 5 and 7 would be absolutely fine. And as I've indicated, really there's loads of books out there that you can find online, in second-hand shops, so you can use any of them. I mean, one of the important things to realise is that an open source language like PHP, it does change quite rapidly. And so you can see over, there were 5 versions in 10 years. So it's worthwhile remembering that, if you've got a book which is quite old, it's possible that the code, the syntax of the language might change slightly. So just bear that in mind when you're looking at an older book. Now, currently, we're on version 7. Version 6, which was planned for sort of 2016, 2017, what actually happened was that wasn't released. It just jumped from 5 to 7, and you can see we're sort of about 2019 version 7.1, and we're still sort of, most people are sort of stuck on about version 7. Different versions were available, and they're kind of planning for version 8 to come out in 2023, but these things change over time.